Good day, everyone. Welcome to Blacklogic. Trump and his European allies weigh NATO-like security guarantees as Zelensky pushes for peace talks, but Putin remains very elusive on this particular topic. Trump eyes a bold peace deal, arranging a potential Putin-Zelensky summit, while the Kremlin keeps expectations low, meaning that they don't really think they can come to a deal because they want Crimea. Russia snatched Crimea in 2014 under Western inaction, a critical piece of the chessboard still shaping global tensions. Also, in 1867, Russia offloaded Alaska to the US for 7.2 million. Now it's a symbol of fading empires and American foresight. We're going to cover Alaska and the deal between Russia and America and why they offloaded that territory. Israel preps for a major operation in Gaza City amid escalating violence and talk of turning the strip into a Middle Eastern frontier. They're going to change it into a new Middle Eastern frontier. U.S. military posturing near Latin waters rattles Maduro, who mobilized militias in a show of socialist muscle from Venezuela. Trump's takeover of D.C. law enforcement sees National Guard roll in, prompting fierce leftist protests and deep outrage. And some of the critics and some of the people in the comment section, we're going to cover that as well. Now, planners from the U.S. and NATO are drafting security guarantee plans, including possible air support, to reassure Ukraine without sending U.S. ground troops, because a lot of the European nations, they were calling for U.S. troops to be on ground. I know we're the fearless fighting force. Me being a 20-year veteran myself of the Marine Corps and the Army, I get it. But even our Air Force of providing air support, we could potentially get into a war with Russia. And believe me, Russia, okay, if we want to encompass the Ottoman Empire, when we're talking about Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, Belarus, even Poland. Now, Poland and Belarus, I don't suspect they will get inside of what we are labeling World War III, but he may get support from North Korea. He may get support from Turkey in some regards. He may get support from India. And when I mean support, it could just be resources. It may not be troops or anything of the sort. But America should not be involved in this, only in the capacity of trying to garner some sort of ceasefire. But as I told you guys earlier, the Kremlin is stating that they don't believe they can come to a peace treaty, even though I've said this on social media multiple times, because people are like, oh, the land belongs to Russia. Yeah, but Russia gave this land up to Ukraine in 1954. And I know this dates back to the mid 1700s, but nonetheless, this was a creed that they both agreed upon, that this land would be given to Ukraine. And ever since then, even since the de-embarkment, the disbandment, the breaking up the Soviet Union, Ukraine has had this land under their charge. So again, he's trying to obtain land that his country gave away, 65 years ago, where he wasn't even, potentially in politics during that time, let alone the president of Russia. So again, these are some of the key facts that we need to look at, because the White House has floated that Budapest, as well as Geneva, for a Putin-Zelensky meeting, possible followed by Trump joining. The Kremlin remains non-committal. And don't forget, Zelensky hates Putin, by the way. He absolutely hates Putin. He cannot trust what Putin states. And he told President Trump, whatever he tells you, do not believe it. He's been making promises and still going to war all the while. He's smiling in your face, always want to take your place, backstabbing Putin. That's basically, in my own words, what I believe Zelensky is trying to relay. Now, Trump warns Putin may be reluctant to the compromise. Again, the reports from the Kremlin actually backs up those sentiments. Now, if we get into this a little bit here, I'm going to break down some of the comments I've been reading that they believe that the land belongs to Russia. But when you dive into the details, you dive into the politics of things, the Crimea was actually annexed by Russia in 2014 after a disputed referendum and after Putin's re-election triggered tensions between the US and Russia. But if we look at this very brief history that I'm just going to just briefly read to you guys, it says in 1954, the Crimea Peninsula was transferred from Russia, Soviet Federal Socialist Republic, to the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. This transfer was formalized by a decree of the Presidium of the USSR Supreme Soviet, which was announced in the Soviet press in late February of 1954, which it states the decision was presented at a symbolic gesture celebrating the 300th anniversary of the treaty, which had previously linked Ukraine and Russia. Again, there's historical context. Crimea had been part of Russia since 1783 when it was annexed by the Russian Empire. So again, as I stated, yeah, Crimea was part of Russia. And do not forget, ladies and gentlemen, Russia is a very, very large country. Now, northern Russia, most of it will state that is inhabitable just because of the landmass and the lack of resources and or the terrain itself, and is extremely cold, by the way. It goes on to say here that the administrative authority of the Crimea Oblast was transferred to the Ukrainian SSR. Both Russia and Ukraine were republics within the Soviet Union at the time. The consequences that this transfer seemingly insignificant at the time. Insignificant at the time. Let's look at Russian history. Later became a point of contention and ultimately a cause of conflict between Russia and Ukraine, especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union and Ukraine's declaration of independence in 1991. So it's almost like they were given this land when they were part of the Soviet Union as a good gesture. So the land is Ukraine's. Now, I want to read the treaty. I want to read the creed to state that if you break apart away from the Soviet Union, that land is then returned to Russia. But if it doesn't have it in there, then the land still belongs to Ukraine. Now, we're going to also, after the news update, folks, we're going to go over why did Russia sell Alaska to America? And at any time would Putin want Alaska back? Will this give Putin just cause if we provide air support to Ukraine to get in war with America? Which I don't think that's a smart idea. I don't think Putin would do that. But it's possible, is it not? Because again, he's very unpredictable. So again, these are some of the things that I think we need to tie into, not connect the dots, but we need to at least mention it. We need to at least notice it just in case. Because again, there's a lot of things going on. As I stated before, Russia sold Alaska to the U.S. in 1867 to offload territorial cost and strength ties amid threats in Europe. Now, supposedly, I forgot the politician name. She used to be a model. She was a governor or senator of Alaska, and she was stating that she can see Russia from her patio. I forgot her name, but of course, that wasn't true. Alaska is closer to America than it is to Russia, but it was still part of Russian land. So again, we're going to get on that just a little bit later so I can provide context. Now, troops earlier, about a week ago, in regards to the proposal to administratively control of Gaza, the occupying of Gaza by the IDF, by the way of the Israeli government. And they're trying to relocate 2 million Palestinians and develop the area as the Riviera of the Middle East. Why does the Riviera sounds like a Trump term? That Benjamin Netanyahu possibly got that term from President Trump. The Riviera of the Middle East, just like the Riviera of America. Ladies and gentlemen, right in our face, whether you are for Israel, against Israel, neutral on Israel, don't care about Israel and or Gaza and Palestinians in the state of Palestine. Critics are stating that we are witnessing a full-fledged genocide modern day times right in our face that the US government is supporting. That is what the reports, that is what the critics are saying. Some people on the right, a lot of people on the left, people who are neutral. But they're going to relocate 2 million people instead of providing medical aid, generators, temporary housing, resources to rebuild. No, occupying, expanding Israeli land and making the Riviera of the Middle East that will be under Israeli rule. That is what I see here, folks. But I'll make sure I keep you guys updated with all of these news updates. Please hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell so you are notified every time I go live and or release a video. Now, in a response to U.S. military deployment in nearby waters, Venezuela regime has mobilized its militias amid political crisis and mass protests. This is basically Venezuela saying we ain't no punks. You ain't going to just send military aircraft carriers and U.S. battleships in Latin America and we're not going to have a response. Now, of course, we're no friends of Venezuela. I'm surprised that Guatemala, I understand why Belize wouldn't get involved. But again, this is a losing battle. If America wanted to go to war with Venezuela, this is my humble opinion, very humble, very meek. We will destroy Venezuela, but I don't want any country to be destroyed. I'm just stating a fact. Our military versus their military. The only way Venezuela will have a chance in defending themselves if other Latin American countries get involved. We're talking about Colombia, Guatemala, Ecuador, El Salvador, Mexico. They will need the entire Central America and some of those Caribbean countries to have a fighting chance against America. I do not want this to happen. I don't want to see it happen. I wish that Venezuela would just mobilize their militia to show a protective stance, not a offensive stance. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about war and positioning of military aircraft carriers and battleships. We have to remember this. If your military shows an offensive stance, that can be an act of aggression to certain military strategists that will inform the president that, hey, they are showing indicators of attacking first that could damage X, Y, and C, military resources from America. So again, we have to look at this bilaterally when it comes to warfare. But if he takes a protective stance, meaning that he's closer to the Venezuelan borders versus, let's say, 50 to 100 miles out in international waters, that could seem as an aggressive stance. I digress. I just want to make that very clear that I don't want America to go to war with anyone. I want our troops home and safe and protect America. I don't want jets in support of Ukraine. I believe you have plenty of European nations that have their own jet that can support Ukraine. I do like the fact that President Trump is trying to broker a peace deal. He's trying to negotiate with both parties to come to some sort of agreement. But as the Kremlin says, okay, the government of Russia, they don't believe they can come to a deal because they want that land back. They want Crimea and they want Ukraine to never, ever join NATO. So again, we'll see how that turns out. And we should have some answers by the end of this week. And I'll keep you guys definitely informed regarding that situation. Okay. And Trump declared a crime emergency in D.C., my hometown, federalizing the MPD and deploying over 1,800 National Guard troops, despite crime being near 30-year lows. Now, some of the National Guard troops are in the nation's capital, around the Smithsonian area, the Pyramid, the Lincoln Memorial, the Capitol, Reflecting Pool, a lot of those areas, while they have the federalizing D.C. police and Maryland police in the urban areas of DC. And there's been a lot of accounts that a lot of the citizens are stating that they're being harassed. This is nothing new. And I've seen a lot of people with white supremacist ideology stating, oh, there's over crime and there's this and that in DC. Why would you want crime in here? There's crime everywhere in the world, ladies and gentlemen. And as I stated multiple times, that DC is a 30-year low. There's no city, there's no place where crime is not happening. There's more egregious crime like murder, rob, theft, this, that, and the other, but there's always some sort of crime that's occurring around the world in every state, every country, and every city. Now, let me show you guys what a lot of people have been saying in regards to the comments they've been making. Let me blow this up as large as I can here. They need to get a job. Oh, protesting is their job. And they're making fun of it because they have people out here that they believe are just liberals. Okay. And again, liberals get painted always in a bad light, no matter what they're protesting about. And here's the thing. I can't just look at somebody and say they're a liberal, right? It's stereotypical, right? This young man, if you see him on the left-hand side with the shades right here with the Mickey Mouse shirt, and it looks like an American Mickey Mouse shirt. Oh, he's a liberal. Then you have a guy here with an army shirt. He probably served, or his family probably served. Oh, he's a liberal. We have a lady here with an orange bandana around her saying free DC with buttons and this, that, and the other. Oh, that's a liberal. Here's a guy with a hat and shades and look like an orange whistle. And you have another guy with no shirt on with an orange whistle with a silver, white, gold chain, possibly. Oh, he's a liberal. Here's a white guy with glasses on right here, ladies and gentlemen, with his hair slicked back. Oh, he is a liberal. So now we're stereotyping what liberals look like. And just to think that they thought all of these people were going to be black. No. Hands off our democracy. They got Doge up there as well. Oh, look at the men and women in military. They look dark melanated hue complexion, doing their duty by the orders of the president, no less. Oh, here are these so-called liberals and the people who are pro-crime. This is not the typical depictions of people that we're seeing. My dad fought fascists. Now I fight fascists here. Save the Constitution. Now, granted, when you put up signs like that, that automatically indicates that you're an immigrant and you may want to tread very lightly in the nation's capital. That's all I'm saying. Let's go here. Here's another brother, National Guard. Again, you see them. It seems as though that the people that are protesting, majority of them are non-melanated people in some regards, where the people who are protecting the nation's capital are just the opposite. Okay. As I told you, DC is 43% black and 37% white. It looks like the 37% is protesting while the 43% is protecting it. All the while, I see my brothers and sisters in the urban areas being harassed by law enforcement to a certain degree. Okay? I'm going to show you the rest of some of these pictures. Again, we see the face of the so-called liberals. Fascism wears diapers now. Okay? Fear tyrants. Tyrants fear Americans. Dump Trump. Uh-oh, we got two black sisters here. There is no hood like statehood. You see, you know, look at the things that we're protesting versus what other people are protesting. We're fighting for DC to be the 51st state so we can have a governor, so we can have more levels of government that we can have to protect DC from the president's takeover. See, political. You see that? Oh, he's a tyrant. He's a fascist. No, there's no hood like statehood. Taxation without representation. See, Bill Clinton got that terminology from black politicians. So we can have representations in Congress, representations in the Senate. So when things like this occur, we can go to the Supreme Court and get it overturned. There's only room for one Pam in MPD, hands off DC. Very different protests. Let me continue. It could turn. Here we go. There's another brother by the MRAP. Okay, that's this abbreviation for the vehicle, MRAP. But us just following orders, war criminals. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a stretch. And And I'm not going to be petty, but she doesn't seem to be Black American. I'm just looking at her facial features. Again, that's a stretch. That's a stretch. But she doesn't seem Black American. But to label men and women in uniform of doing their following orders as war criminals. And if I showed you the pictures again, ladies and gentlemen, no one's holding a firearm. What war criminals are you talking about? Are you talking about the American military? Are you talking about those men and women who are following the orders of the president as I would if I was in uniform? I'm not bringing harm to any citizens. They are in place to show a sign of force to deter and to decrease the amount of violence. Now, again, I don't agree of them being there, but as a Marine and soldier myself, I would be there in place regardless of how I feel. I'm not a conscientious subjector, no, because I'm not harming anyone. I'm just showing a sign of force. We've done it in many occasions, not in the U.S., but in many occasions we've done that because that would deter a lot of people from doing the wrong thing. So again, I do not agree with that sign. They are not war criminals. We are not war criminals. This is not normal. No kings, okay? Criminals out of D.C. starred the Epstein files. Again, we see the face of the people who are mostly protesting. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. Again, look at the men and women in uniform. All of the men and women in uniform seem to be Black. Every single picture I've shown you guys, every men and women seem to be Black. And guess what they're doing in a Black city? Following the orders of the president. Yes, Black people have decorum. Yes, Black people have discipline. And yes, Black people follow orders. According to the crime statistics by the DOJ and the FBI, I know you guys love the statistics when it comes from the government itself. Majority of people in politics are white, and they run these law enforcement, government, federal entities. They state that the group of people in America that commits the most crimes are Anglo-Saxon, are Caucasian, are white people. And that's not to demonize or to have believed that, oh, 1 out of 3 people that commit crime. No, I'm not stating that. I'm just basing it off the statistics. And if you don't, just try to, contradict my saying and pop up the numbers yourself, and we can have that debate. But again, I mean, I'm not trying to debate with numbers because, again, then you would say, oh, the numbers have been fudged. Those numbers are left over from the Biden administration that depicted us as, no. Even if you look at third party, you look at Pew Research, you look at the Brookings Institute, the numbers remain the same. And again, I want to show you some of these comments down here. Let me show you some of these comments of what the people were saying. All right. Let's see here. They need to get a job, or protesting is their job. They could surprise a few dumbest, even in alleged democracy that the Dems wrongly think we have. Laws are still enforced in a democracy. So actually, Trump is enforcing the laws of your imagined democracy while functioning out of a republic. Even a democracy has laws to be followed. I agree with that. They say Soros funded AstroTurf, meaning that George Soros is funding crime. Paid protesters, they don't have jobs because they're paid protesters. There's a lot of paid protesters. There must be, I mean, how much you're getting paid to protest a day? $500? That's pretty good money. I'm just making up arbitrary numbers here, folks. Why does the leftist protest getting rid of crime? What a strange and dangerous group. Fake outrage. Trump push to quell violence in D.C. is very much like his immigration push. If you want to deport large numbers of illegal immigrants, go after those in agriculture, hotel, home maintenance, and landscaping businesses. That's where the majority of them are employed, illegally, I might add. Hands off our National Guard, blue and nice. I agree with that. These are paid protesters because normal people are tired of crime running rampant in these blue cities. Fake news jumps all over these protests to help their anti-Trump agenda. And this is why I was saying that they're saying liberals, because they're saying leftists, and they're saying that blue cities, we already know what that indicates. There is crime in so-called red cities too. There's crime in Dallas. There's crime in Houston. There's crime in Austin. There's crime in Tampa Bay, Tallahassee, Orlando, Miami, There's crime wherever people are. There's crime in majority black cities. There's crime in majority white cities. There's crime in majority Hispanic cities and towns and townships. There's crime. Now, I wanted to say this in one of my last videos, and it's about guns in America. And when I was trying to depict or make reference of the contrast of violence in European nations versus crime in America, there was one element missing on being, quote unquote, in somewhat an oppressive people as Black Americans in America, being in a land that is historically and traditionally yours, and that only 500,000 of your people brought over here in slave ships, that majority of us was already here. Now, I know a lot of you guys may not believe that, but that's okay. We can have that debate. But I think another key component is that these European nations, majority of them, I believe there's only like one or two European nations that allow their citizens to have guns. How do you get rid of gun violence? You get rid of the guns. Some people will state that the way that you get rid of gun violence are people who are committing the violence with guns. Guns are not the problem. It's the people who are committing crimes with the guns. When I look at Korea, you rarely have any murders that derive around guns. Japan, a lot of the Asian countries, and a lot of the Anglo-Saxons, Caucasian, white nations in Europe, they don't have crime violence like that either. People are not just getting arbitrarily, haphazardly, indiscriminately killed by themselves or by their law enforcement. And granted, I uphold the Constitution at all costs. The right to bear arms, Second Amendment. I get it. I understand this was during a time where we were fighting against Great Britain, the UK, and a lot of the European nations, but mostly Great Britain, so we can have independence July 4th, 1776, and that they will never invade America by ground ever again, because every single American will have the ability to have a firearm and protect ourselves, our family, and our land, and thus our entire country. I understand. But me not being a liberal, me not being an independent, and me not being a Republican, am I a Black radical conservative? That's the question I ask myself. Because I'm gonna let the cat out the bag. I have multiple guns. I shouldn't probably say this, but I'm gonna say it. I have handguns, shotguns, and I have AR-15s. Yeah. I'm an American, and I'm a veteran. So believe me when I tell you this, who in America should bear arms? Oh, those who don't have police records and felonies and misdemeanors. Those who may have some mental issues. You know, the one thing that they don't do when you go and purchase a gun, a lot of times I go to gun auctions to purchase my guns, because you can broker a deal. You can kind of negotiate a little bit better if you went to a gun shop, or even you could probably even get a better quality gun instead of going to like a pawn shop. That they just do an FBI background check, but you're not hooked up to a lie detector test to see if you are in an emotional state while buying the gun. Because some people are buying guns because they plan to do something with that gun. You know, me personally, my training just has me that I have guns for protection of my home and my family. And in regards exercising my Second Amendment rights. But should everybody have the right and access to guns simply because they don't have a criminal background? This is my personal opinion. Hell to the no. There's some people who are just not stable, right? Who hasn't rung the bell, so to speak. I digress. I do want to touch on Alaska and Russia giving or basically selling Alaska to America, because this story begins in the mid 19th century with an empire overstretched and bleeding money. See, Imperial Russia by the 1850s, Russia was struggling with wars in Europe, mostly the Crimean War. Crimea pops up again. 1853 to 1856, which drained its finances and exposed the vulnerability of its far-flung colonies. Alaska, or Russian America, was vast but remote. Frozen for most of the year and costly to defend it, Russia feared that if another war broke out, especially with its rising rival, Great Britain, it might lose Alaska by force without a single ruble in return. So Tsar Alexander II made a decision that seemed strategic at the time: better to sell Alaska than lose it for nothing. See, this was a brokering deal that they had. So they're going to get something for Russia, or they may just lose it in the war to Great Britain. And meanwhile, the United States of America was on the hunt for expansion. We were always trying to expand our lands. That is just the way that colonial powers work. They're always trying to expand their land. That is one of the reasons why Donald Trump is taking back the Panama Canal. Now it's the American Canal. The Gulf of Mexico is now the Gulf of America. We're expanding our territories very easily. Now, fresh from the Civil War between 1861 and 1865, America was actually bruised, but we were very, very ambitious. And Secretary of State at the time, William H. Seward, saw that the potential of Alaska as both a shield against European influence and a treasure chest of untapped resources. Now, granted, Russia wanted something for these resources, 7.2 million. In 1867, negotiations between Russian Minister Edward del Stockel and Seward sealed the deal, and the United States purchased Alaska again for 7.2 million, a price marked by critics basically calling it the icebox. And to skeptics, America had just bought an endless sheet of frozen tundra, but to visionaries, it was a master stroke because they believed that there was great resources on Alaska, and especially we called Alaska the last frontier. So why did Russia sell? Alaska was undefendable against Britain's naval power from nearby Canada. Do not forget, Canada, Australia, still a lot of countries within the Caribbean, they're under British rule in some regards. Even though they have their own prime ministers, they have their own governments, they still have to bow down to the Queen of England. Now, also, Russia needed cash after the Crimean War, and that the empire wanted to consolidate power at home, not hold distant, icy colonies that wasn't even collected to the land. Again, as I told you, I believe that Alaska is closer to America than it is to Russia. Now, a lot of people believe that this sale was about money. According to Russia, it wasn't about money. It was about survival. It was about strategy and shifting global balance. They say, well, this land is under our rule. We can potentially sell it to the Americans. They will have to defend the land if they will ever get into war again with Great Britain, Canada, etc. But we can at least get some money from it, and this can help our efforts. So again, if you look at the critics of the 1867, during that time, they were silenced when Alaska revealed its true worth. If you look at the gold rush of 1896, Alaska became a magnet for fortune seekers, and the discovery of petroleum in the Prudhoe Bay turned Alaska into one of the U.S. energy powerhouses. A lot of our energy and oil reserves are in Alaska. Alaska's position made it America's northern shield against Japanese forces in World War II and Soviet bombers during the Cold War, the same land that they sold to us. What Russia saw as a burden, America transformed it into a golden frontier of wealth, power, and defense. It was very strategic to us. And we saw that. So when they came and they tried to broker this deal, we were like, yeah, 7.2 million. How would you like that? They said, indeed. we're going to sell it. So today, Alaska remains a reminder of geopolitical foresight versus short-sightedness because the U.S. gained 586,000 square miles of land at just 2 cents per acre. Lord have mercy. 586,000 square miles of land. And if you do the math, that's just 2 cents per acre. I only need 10 acre, folks, at 2 cents. So Russia, now seeking to project power in the Arctic, looks back at the sale with a mix of regret and historical irony. And that's why a lot of these countries are in Antarctica. They're really looking for resources. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories around it. There's aliens in in Antarctica. There's crash spaceships from other worlds in Antarctica. That's why a normal person, a regular human being, no matter what country you're from, can't just travel to Antarctica. You got to get permission, and you got to go through a lot of bureaucratic international red tape, etc. This is a lot of historical irony when I look at this deal that we made with Russia in the attainment of Alaska, because this deal often compared to China's Belt and Road missteps of America's Iraqi war cause, as we look at the contrasting correlations of these two. And this is a lesson that what looks foolish in the moment may be a strategic victory for centuries when it comes to the deal that we made. Now, if Russia held onto Alaska, imagine today's world: Moscow controlling vast Arctic oil reserves, direct borders with Canada, and a stronger hand in global energy politics. Instead, it became one of America's greatest bargains in history. To this day, you got to go through Canada to get to Alaska, and or take a ferry from Washington to Alaska. That's why when you are, if you ever been to Alaska, they're like, oh, in the lower 48. Because again, majority of the U.S., excluding its territories, are combined, with the exception of Alaska and Hawaii. So when we look at history and how Russia sold Alaska to America, and how Russia gave Crimea to the Ukrainians, the only question I have: who really owns Crimea?